Hello YouTubers, Joe Kersey here, and continuing our series of my mother's writings. I still have yet to find the one where she talks about the 4-year-olds shouldn't get older than 4-year-olds, but I'll work on that. I might get to that in 2 or 3 days. I have one now called Joe Didn't Go, and in this piece she discusses how my dad did not get drafted into the Second World War. In fact, his brother, who worked for NCR, did not get drafted because he was considered to have a defense necessary job. And that's leaving aside the fact that the Kerseys in general came from a background of Quaker quasi-pacifism, you know. There were some people in our family's branches that fought in the Civil War, but you know, the real warriors were on my mother's side. Yeah, you know, that were in my direct line of descent. But leaving that aside, we have a piece. See, this was an acacia of documents that I found after my mother died, and I was cleaning out what I felt legitimately I could clean out of the house. At that time, I did own half that property. But my mother did tell me about certain things she wanted me to have. And this is one of the things she implied she wanted me to have. She wanted me to have her writings. Joe Didn't Gag. Herewith. Volumes have been written concerning the treatment of the returning war veteran. Yes, and you know, and you watch PBS specials about this. That's true. But what should we do about the young men who remained at home doing their share notwithstanding? These new civilians will receive their deserved glory. They will be given job preferences. They will be praised. You know, the ruptured duck pin, you know. Their war experiences will be a justifiable cause for appreciative awe. Indeed. That was my indeed. I'm all for giving the war veteran his place in the sun. Goodness knows he's earned it with the horror he's seen walking with him the rest of his days and the sacrifice of a huge slice of his youth in the bargain. Thanks, Mom. And I don't say that sarcastically. I know it sounds sarcastic because everything I say sounds sarcastic. I don't mean that sarcastic. But Joe didn't go to war. Joe is her husband. Joe's my dad. At least not in the sense the GI did. He stayed home like millions of others and did his full share by remaining in a job he'd been doing since his university days. Agriculture. He worked harder, it's true, and with no extra pay. He didn't quit his post to seek a job in a war plant where juicy wages made his salary look like pre-war chicken feed. Boy, that would have been true. I'm taking Joe as an example because I know his case so well. After all, I'm his wife. However, there are there's hundreds of thousands facing the same problems that are being submitted to the questioning stares at a lapel minus a service button. I was talking about the ruptured duck, you know. And often the outrageously callous questions by small people. Although we moved to the country 9 years ago, so she would have written this in 1945, just at the end of the war, because they moved out to their place in 1936. long before war even threatened, well, at least in the United States. There are those who say, humph, moved to the country to avoid the draft. Last spring, a man who had known Joe for years stopped his car on the pretext of getting water for the radiator. He began berating Joe for setting such a poor example for his boys. And she talks about what my dad did. Joe teaches vocational agriculture, in the local high school, and did until they ended the program in 1968, 69. Well, no, it was a little earlier than that. But anyway, then he was moved into teaching general science. He began berating Joe for setting such a poor example for his boys because our corn stood forlorn, weathered, and as yet unpicked. My dad said, the Army drafted the boy whom I had engaged to pick the corn. Joe, most patient of men, explained. Well, I don't remember him being all that patient. But I do remember the fact that a lot of the time we had corn hand-picked. Why in the hell aren't you in the Army? Our nasty visitor inquired. Just moved out here to keep out of the Army, I suppose. Why you? Well, my mother didn't specify a first letter on whatever my dad said. I'll have you know I moved out here 9 years ago. Joe was no longer the most patient of men. In fact, when he came in the house, he was positively green and shaking with rage, an emotion I shared when he related the incident. Now, I relate to that. Now, once did Joe institute proceedings to influence the draft board in his behalf. Although at one time he had been reclassified and had his screen or blood test. Then a few days later, a reprieve came in the form of another small white card bearing yet a new classification. It seemed a new ruling had been issued, which placed Joe and thousands like him in the position of being better qualified to aid the war effort by remaining in their present jobs. This is actually the first time I've read this. Now Joe's begun to worry what our 22-month-old Abby, well, she's using a pseudonym on Howie, is going to think about her dad not going to war. Well, I got a certain amount of that crap when I was a kid, actually. These guys got, you're digging around and pretending to play war and all that shit. Yeah, I got a certain amount of crap. Now, Joe's beginning to worry. Okay, I said that. You shouldn't worry, I tell him. We'll explain to her just what it was when she's old enough to understand. But will that day ever come when she'll understand? I mean, they'll be her classmates at school telling about their father's war experiences while Abby, i.e. Howie, must remain silent and give what their young friends will consider an anemic account of their dad's share of the war. And poor Abby may be called upon to bear a few barbed remarks herself in spite of the fact she was not a war baby, as so many are accused of being if they came along while fatherhood was a reason for exemption. Well, more of that anon, perhaps. Let's put that. Let's clarify that. As my mother said to me, since my dad was in an exempted occupation, being a farmer and teaching. When they started to draft married people, and then married people. Well, it was married people without kids. That's when they decided to try to have a kid. And so then they had my sister in December of 1943. So I think my mother might be being a bit disingenuous in this last statement. Because she didn't come along while fatherhood was a reason for exemption. I mean, she came along just after it became a reason for exemption in a married couple situation. Well, enough of that. Such a reason was written off the books long before Abby was even thought of. Well, it was when we thought Joe's going was imminent, we decided on that. Well, no, so she's getting into it. Okay. I wanted something of Joe with me while he was away. I didn't want to be left alone, and if he shouldn't return, which we admitted is in the realm of possibility, our life together would have as its fulfillment our son or daughter. That's fair enough. We were nearing 35, too, having postponed parenthood until we had the home and promise of the future we wanted for our family. So behold Abby, meaning Hallie, our beloved daughter, whose infancy and babyhood Joe had been privileged to glimpse, as so many war fathers have it. That's true. When I say glimpse, I mean just that, because Joe's work in normal times is an all-day and several nights a week affair. With his added wartime load, it's meant almost every night, together with his daytime duties. Jealousy plays no small part in the attitude of a great many people. My son, brother, father, or husband had to guess. Why didn't he? Even our relationship with the couple we consider our dearest friends were strained for a while. I don't know who that was. That's interesting. No. Even our relationship with the couple we consider our dearest friends were strained for a time. About that time, Joe was anticipating calling the next exploiter. Boyd, never heard him talk about a Boyd. Learned he'd be called in a matter of a few weeks, so he enlisted in the Navy. On his 2 furloughs, the force were together. Embarrassing periods of silence would occur. Their voice breaking in sounded hollow and strained, and it was due to the Boyd had to go system of rationalizing. Boyd is in Guam now. Betty, his wife, visited us a few days recently. Never heard of either of these folks. Interesting. She had been educated into a tolerant attitude someplace along the way. During the 2 years Boyd had been stationed in Florida, and she'd been a USO secretary. Perhaps the attitude of a great many people will mellow with time, but the stinging injustice of being considered a slacker is somewhat not soon forgotten. Already, our 4-year-old nephew has asked his father, Daddy, why didn't you go fight the Germans and Japs? That would be Charles, my first cousin, who's now long dead. At that time, 4 years old. His father looked helplessly at his mother. The fact that Martha, which would be, we called her Auntie Ola Hopkins Kersey, is never at a loss for words, and she never was providential at the moment. Your daddy was doing a good job and was needed for here, son. And he was. I can't remember what he was doing, but he was. His father was overage and engaged in the dairy business. Oh, there you go. That's what I was going to get to next. Doesn't seem a hero's role to young Johnny. Well, that'd be Charles. My nearest male relative dead. Well, other than my son. There are those who did manage jobs in order to escape the job, change jobs in order to escape the draft. This was legitimate and encouraged even when labor was being drained of its manpower. If they did a job considered essential enough to warrant their exemption from active service by their war and draft boards, which were composed of citizens of high moral and intellectual integrity. I know the people that were on my draft board. I don't think you were right about that one, by the way. Jeez. No, I, for one, feels a mistake to embarrass them by looking askance at their lack of service ribbons. Well, I agree with the conclusion, but not the rationale for it. Since the war ended, Joe has been offered 3 jobs, better so far as financial returns. Jobs he really feels he would like, but would his tenure be cut short by a returning veteran, even though the jobs are new ones created by an expanding industry? I don't ever recall hearing this. This could be, since she's writing this as a story, it's hard to tell what she's driving at. I repeat, I'm in favor of the returned serviceman receiving every consideration that Joe did a job and is entitled to some security in a new pursuit. There was a boy, the son of one of our neighbors, who was going to be called upon to face some very embittering moments in the not too distant future. He is almost the only young man left on a farm in this area, and he's here only because he and his parents appealed his case. For this reason, the other farmers in the neighborhood whose sons had to go feel bitter. I've never heard any of this before. But Alfred, and I have no idea who this might be, I might figure it out as I read this, really was needed and was doing an excellent job on his father's farm. The fact that he took advantage of the machinery organized by those in control during the wartime emergency and appealed his case with a resulting favorable decision shouldn't be criticized by those who had the same recourse to justice but neglected to exercise their prerogative. Wow, it'd be nice if she'd had this attitude towards some of the shit that I went through. However unjust Alfred, whoever the fuck he is, I'll have to think about whoever he is going to be called upon to face some bad moments when he meets his returning friends. I've now kind of figured out who it might be, and I'm not going to say the name. Because we were here at home who cry for tolerance among nations are going to choose to misunderstand. Let's run that through. However unjust Alfred is going to be called upon to face some bad moments when he meets his returning friends. Because we here at home who cry for tolerance among nations are going to choose to misunderstand our home front veterans. That's awkward syntax, mother. If I had the superb vocabulary of Churchill, thank you, I might plead Joe's and the universal Joe's case with eloquence. As it is, I can only humbly hope friendly understanding will grow in eyes that are now hostile. I think that the Alfred was the fellow that ended up running. Well, I think he was the guy I ended up working for several years later. Let's put it that way. I'm going to say thank you, YouTubers, for listening to this. And this is going to be a bit of a series. I hope I can find the one where she talks about why do they have to grow older? But we'll see if I can fetch that up. So bye-bye, YouTube.